Max, are you there? Thank you. What's up, Delia? Wow. Hello. Good afternoon or morning. Morning. Afternoon. It's supposed to be morning, but it's different light. Anyway, so a few years ago, I actually got laughed at being on stage kind of like this one, where I tried to declare that Facebook and Microsoft were going to compete, and MySpace and Microsoft were going to compete, and basically everybody's going to be an operating system, and the crowd actually burst out laughing. It was very embarrassing. Since then, social operating systems or social platforms have launched, mobile platforms have launched, social mobile platforms have launched, and pretty much anybody who had a word platform in their pitch deck would get twice the valuation, so I was clearly right. So it's so common, in fact, to be a platform that at least one person on this panel is a representative of two completely different platform initiatives. We'll get to that later. So in the next 35 minutes, we're going to try to cover pretty much every imaginable business, philosophical, and technological problem having to do with platforms, or at least whatever time allows. Briefly introduce my panelists. Gundotra comes from Google. He's overseeing platform and mobile application development as VP of Engineering. Before that, he worked at Microsoft, and he is, as the GM of Platform Evangelism, was responsible for Steve Ballmer's Developers song. David Treadwell is at Microsoft, and he works on the live platform services, which is defining and implementing the next generation of platform services that all Microsoft service-enabled applications and sites will use. I copied and pasted that from the conference website, and so I'm hoping he'll explain to me what the next generation part means. Amit Kapur is from MySpace. He is the chief operating officer of MySpace, where he basically runs just about everything that Christoph Wolff doesn't, as far as I can tell, including the platform, which I care about a lot. And he is also related to a very famous Indian movie and music star, as I found out last night, from the 80s. We speculated that I, in fact, may have been conceived to one of the songs by him because it was so popular in Russia. Ilya Trigg comes from Facebook, and as you probably well know, is the head of public policy and platform marketing there. Before that, he did public relations and many similar things at Google. He is the only person on this panel that does not have an engineering degree. So,
I'm the affirmative action candidate in the panel.
We won't hold it against you.
All right. And thank you, John, for the introduction. But for those of you who don't know me, I run a company called Slide, and other than that, I'm famous for my very consistent fashion sense. Always wear exactly the same shirt. So we only have 35 minutes, so I'm going to try to go about as fast as possible and prod the panelists to go just as fast. In order, please define the business case for your social platform. For a social platform, actually, it doesn't have to be social. Your platform for your company. As you're thinking about it, imagine yourself being an Army or Navy or Marine recruiter talking to your potential developer base. What is it that's so awesome about the platform that your company is going to benefit, that they're going to want to join the movement, be part of the revolution?
Okay, I guess you want me to start?
Please.
Max didn't prepare us in advance, so this is the first time we've heard this question. You know, at Google, the platform we were born on was the open web. After spending more than 15 years driving the adoption of Windows, I can tell you that the difference between Windows and the open web is vast. And to be part of a team at Google that's driving the growth of the open web is an amazing thing. It is the greatest platform our generation has ever seen. And the kind of innovation that has happened in the last 10 years, Amazon, eBay, Google, Yahoo, and many, many other companies have been born because of that open web, we think is just the beginning. I think my children will live in a world where the web and the kind of applications that we can't even imagine today will be delivered on that. And since you asked about the business case, Google benefits, it looks like they're working on you, Google benefits probably more than any other company from the growth of the web. So obviously, one of the first things you do is you come and you do a Google search. And so we have a great economic model behind driving the growth of the web, and we're interested in driving the web because we think it's the right thing to do.
Great. So I think it's important to define what we see as our platform, because platform is a pretty generic term that's used in many different contexts. In the context of this conversation, and social platforms, the way that we look at our platform is that it consists of 3 different components. The first is this internal component, which is our open social implementation on the site where developers can build applications on MySpace. The second is an external component, which is our data availability connection so that externally people can access users' data and build social applications off of MySpace. And then the third is the community, the developer community that encompasses both of those different implementations. When we're talking about the business case around it, it's pretty straightforward. And I think, first off, the product vision behind all of it is that all of these things are meant to stimulate innovation on the entire web by giving third-party developers access to user data so they can build more personal experiences and more social experiences both on and off MySpace. For the business case, though, it's pretty straightforward. The first is that you drive increased engagement by building new features for our users, so they have access to new products, new features on the site. If it's games, if it's new utilities on the site for communications, all of these things drive activity and drive people within our ecosystem. And the second is that it builds a new ecosystem. It builds new economies in which we can participate. And so a few examples of that are an ad revenue economy where third-party developers want to make money through ad revenue. And there are ways that we, as we build our audience network, can tap into that and help enable them do that. Second is virtual goods and payments, where we're looking into ways where we can enable that as well. And we're seeing a lot of success through certain app developers on the site in that area. And then a third area is through promotions, where we can help drive a lot of traffic to them. And we've seen a lot of success, I know, with your company and others even, for marketing applications on the site through our self-serve implementation of My Ads, as well as just doing direct deals to drive traffic that way. And I think one of the things you see is that we are very focused on helping these developers build a viable business model. It's just been sort of fundamental to MySpace from the very beginning that we believe that the product experience and building an innovative product experience goes hand in hand with building a sustainable business model. And we want to make sure that that sort of philosophy applies over to our platform.
So our recruiting pitch probably, we're looking for a few good men and women. Is that how it begins? So many of you might have been here yesterday when Mark Zuckerberg was here talking a little bit about the platform, and I think he articulated it very well. I think Saul Hansel in the New York Times really articulated it sort of cleverly in calling it Zuckerberg's law. The idea is the world, the way we view it, the world isn't about information, it's about people, and people like to share information. And we believe that more and more of that sharing is taking place on the web. And for us, our platform is designed to be a place where information that people share flows through the system and offers the opportunity for you to see the world filtered through the lens of your friends, your family, your colleagues. And the business case for that is, if you believe as we do that that's happening more and more, faster and faster, there are extraordinary opportunities for us as the vehicle for that to generate business and financial benefits. And even more, there are an extraordinary range of opportunities for developers to create engaging, sharing experiences for people to share with their friends and to provide an extraordinary range of opportunities for them to monetize that engagement and that sharing.
So at Microsoft, our philosophy on this is we're at the very early stages of a number of significant platform shifts, and we think that it'll take many years to work through this. We've been fortunate to have Ray Ozzie with us, and he's been pushing us very hard on the concept, the strategy that people care about their data, their devices, their people, and their applications. It's not about any one of those, really all 4 of those, sharing across people, having data, the applications that use it, and all the different kinds of computing devices that we have. That's really the best way to provide the best experiences for users. The way we're going about building our platform that addresses those 4 things is around 3 primary attributes. We want it to be comprehensive. That is, we want to have low-level utility computing infrastructure like we have with Windows Azure. And then we want to go all the way up the top of the stack to high-level social platform, things like we have with the Windows Live Contacts API. We're going to provide the tools and management to make it easier for developers to take advantage of all that. We also care a lot about choice. We want to make sure that all of this is interoperable. You can pick and choose. While we have a comprehensive platform, you don't have to take it all. You can take pieces of it. It's all based on open standard protocols, HTTP, REST, SOAP, FeedSync, open protocols, so that you can even access it from all kinds of different computing infrastructures, whether it's LAMP, Python, et cetera. And finally, we care a lot about the client. We think a lot of the computing horsepower that you have physically close to you is critical for providing the best experiences. The web matters a ton. It's awesome, as these guys said, for the sharing that it enables. But what you can do on a physical device right next to you is super important as well. And there are many examples in the industry. I think the iPhone developer platform is a good example of exploiting what you can do on a client backed by a service. So our platform philosophy is to provide infrastructure that enables developers to build applications that join people, data, devices, and applications.
That explains some of what live platform services means to me. So before we move on to the next question, a quick follow-up. Probably not so much for you, David, just because of that client comment that puts a monkey wrench into my argument. But each one of you guys basically said, well, the web, it's open, it's good, it's sharing, it's information, people, all sorts of stuff. And yet each one of you guys has gone and built something that lives inside your own site. So these are, in fact, platforms that aren't completely open. They're basically come to us and build the thing inside. Conversely, of course, since then, each one of the platforms has said, well, actually, wait a second, we have these APIs that will enable a platform outside. So is that the natural progression? Are you actually saying, oh, wait, that whole thing inside the site was a mistake? We want you guys to go out and have fun? Or how do you reconcile it two?
So I'm going to go off something Amit said earlier. I think when you talk about platform, you have to disambiguate the term. There are multiple layers of extensibility. There's the open web platform, where you can build all sorts of things. I believe that it is the best platform, and it is enough. But I think when people build applications above that, whether it be MySpace or whether it be something that Google does, that those applications have their own extensibility. If you go back 15 years ago, you might think of Windows as a platform. You might think of Office.
It's the ultimate open platform, actually.
Well, and then Office had its own extensibility, right? You could write macros within Office, but that was a different level. And so I think what you're seeing here is at the application level, you will have different attempts to make those things extensible, whether it's a social site, whether it's any other kind, whether it's eBay, whether it's Amazon. People will extend those applications, but those applications are built on the broader horizontal web platform. And I think sometimes when we say platform, we confuse the two.
Well, I agree with a lot of that. I think that it is sort of a natural evolutionary trend, though, that you do see this extensibility kind of continue outside of the network, and I think that you're going to see a lot of those lines that exist today continue to blur. But I think if you look at it in the context of today and in the implementation on the web today, there's advantages to having applications that live on the site in that they're able to tie into our communication system. It's more sort of organic with the way people use MySpace today. But over time, definitely, I think that people. Specialists specialize on their own websites in ways that we may not be able to provide them, the sort of tools that they can do it on their own. And so if you're looking at if it's an e-commerce site or if it's a niche content site, they're going to do potentially a better job developing and building their product on their own site. And so what our whole concept behind data availability, which is saying sort of a key component of our platform, is to enable that with the ability for them to personalize those experiences and the ability for them to give those experiences social context. And but I don't think it was what we did off the start was the wrong direction. It was just the first step, and now here's the second step. And I think that there's going to be many more as you continue to see that evolve.
I think that's exactly right. This is an evolution. We have 120 million people on Facebook. Sometimes the experience they want to have is within, and sometimes a developer wants to be able to connect within that experience and offer something that's consistent with what people are already familiar with. Sometimes they want something completely different. Sometimes they really want to establish their own brand, their own presence, their own separate experience. It's up to the developer. We've had experiences, I think, with the Travel Channel, for example, has done something with us, and they found that the application that they built on Facebook had substantially greater traffic and generated substantially greater traffic than the site that they had off of Facebook. But by giving, as Amit was saying, by giving people the opportunity to build within or off, it provides the greatest diversity of opportunities for the developer.
Makes a lot of sense. So one last touch on that then. The reason I think it's so interesting is because there's a natural tension between the behavior you would expect to have with your platform, and this involves Microsoft's platform as well, where you wake up in the morning and you're a startup, say, well, I have nothing to lose. I can go and invest my time, money, and effort in your platform because that looks like a great opportunity to me. If I'm an established company, not necessarily going to jump off a cliff into the potentially warm waters that Facebook or MySpace or Microsoft or Google platforms are allowing me to have. Where's the tension? What does that mean for you? Are these APIs once for big companies, once for small companies, or how does that play out?
I think you set up clear rules and you follow those rules, and the first thing that you need to do is have very clear lines of communication, and so that whatever changes you're making on the site and whatever those rules and policies are, that you're very open and transparent with your community. And I think actually it's a key reason why what we've done with Open Social, we believe that that's kind of the right direction to go, because we have such a thriving open community and open communication within that channel. But from our standpoint, one of the most important things with our platform is that we have very clear guidelines, very clear rules, and we adhere to them. And so, you and other developers can feel a lot of comfort when they get up in the morning, knowing that they're not going to be shut off. If we were to have anything too ambiguous or too subjective, then it's not going to be in our interest, because in the long run, there's not going to be that alignment of interests for the developers to feel secure and to focus their efforts on our platform.
And to build on that, I very much agree with Amit's point. A platform is only successful if it benefits all the major parties in that platform ecosystem. It has to benefit the developer, of course. It has to benefit the platform provider. And it especially has to benefit the end users who make use of the applications built on that platform. And so for that reason, one strong philosophy we have is that as we provide developer infrastructure in this very new world, we want to make sure that the investments that developers make on top of that infrastructure will be there for the long term. You don't want people spending millions of dollars building an application and the platform changes out from under them in a significant way. So these platforms are very new, and we want to make sure that the investments that developers make are preserved for the long term.
It's actually an excellent lead up to my next question. So now that I know, since I'm on the other side of it, although we agreed not to talk about my company on this platform, being a platform is actually very hard. I think it's probably the single hardest job one can volunteer for in the current economy, one might say. You have all these stakeholders, crazy people protesting underneath your office demanding you don't change or you do change, or you do more, you do less. And it's actually new. So one might think that there's all this precedent. Microsoft had written the rules starting 30 years ago, but that's actually not entirely true. Microsoft gave the developers about a 5-year block of time between each major platform release. And so you basically had these awesome niches that were created by way of Microsoft forgetting or not having enough time to build something that looks like an obvious feature. For example, the entire industry of CD and DVD burners was based on the fact that Microsoft doesn't quite have the time to ship the right software. And so all sorts of companies were built, sold, bought, and some of them went public just on a deficiency that created an opportunity. That is not the case with any of the platforms represented on this panel. You can release software 2 to 3 times a week if you're slow, and twice a day if you're fast. I certainly believe that to be true for every single one. At least the opportunity is there. On mobile, it's even more insane. You can have a complete, super tight control. So things like Android and iPhone platforms have even more interesting challenges. And you can't really avoid doing it either, because you have to compete. There are all these other guys outside there saying, well, I have a platform that changes fast and it changes for the better. So you got to innovate. But you have to, these developers, they demand their investment must be protected and all that good stuff. So how do you reconcile? How do you innovate but not undermine the developer trust and community that you already built? And Microsoft probably, for lack of a better example, is the oldest player in the platform business, at least in this group. So what have you learned, and what's the advice?
Yeah, well, one thing, the platforms that we have at Microsoft, especially as you get lots of applications built on top of those platforms, compatibility and a consistent environment for those applications becomes super, super critical. So we spend a giant amount of time and resources trying to ensure that we have compatibility of those platform initiatives. And that's why we're careful when we release new platform infrastructure, that we can know that we'll support that for the long term. Because it does, when you're building your own application, your own sort of constrained experience, you can innovate on it very quickly because other people haven't made an investment on top of you and haven't tried to extend it in a way. But as soon as you open that up, an implicit part of the contract between the platform provider and the developers building on top of it is that their investments are going to be preserved for the long term. So that's why we spend so much time making sure that the platform investments or the platform exposure that we do is something that won't change out from under people, and we make it as consistent as possible. There is a balance there. You can't be perfect. Anytime you change a line of code, there's a risk of a breakage. But we work really, really hard to ensure that when we release something, we'll know we support it for the long term.
So the formula is backwards compatibility till Windows 3.0, which lets its
Exactly.
memory.
You don't have to go forever. We don't
has
support
gone away,
DOS
literally.
anymore, but you do have to have a long time horizon on that.
Doesn't it make it really, really difficult to innovate?
Yeah, it does.
So I think there are technical issues, but I also think there's sort of procedural or political issues.
That's actually far more interesting.
Yeah. So you know, the political issues, it seems to me, or the process issues, maybe there are 4 or 5. So one, it seems to me that you have to have, at least for us, you have to have strategic alignment. People need to know where you're going, what the evolution of your platform is, so that they're not hit out of left field. You know, and I talked a little bit, for example, for us about where we're going. Mark talked about that yesterday. So a second thing is transparency. You have to let people know about changes before they happen. And I have to say candidly, I'm not an engineer. Engineers like to launch something. They like to launch stuff and then tell people about it afterwards. And that's a real challenge internally as well as externally. And sometimes at Facebook we've done a really good job at that, and candidly sometimes we've not done as good a job at that. But that's something that's clearly a priority for us. And as the developer community gets larger, as our ecosystem gets larger, that's something that's important. You know, third is feedback. So once you're announcing stuff, once you're doing stuff, you have to be able to hear back from your developers about what, you know, how they're reacting to the changes you're making, what's working, what's not. You know, again, for us, we've tried as part of our profile redesign to help developers with the issue of discovery. Some of those efforts have not gone very well, and I assure you, and maybe there are people in the room who've been, you know, apart from the panel, who've been quite vocal about that, and that's an area of feedback where, you know, where we hear people loud and clear. Sort of a fourth thing would be sort of tools and resources, and that is, what are the tools we give developers, or any of us give developers, to respond to the changes we're making. And you know, I don't want to go into all the details, but we feel part of the challenge that Facebook had was, you know, this platform's just a little bit more than a year and a half old. When it got launched, people were blown away by how many people signed up. For over 400,000 developers signed up. This was not, you know, this was not the, you know, the business plan that had been, you know, assumed. And so there's been a tremendous amount of scrambling to scale the organization. And I think we've done some really creative things in terms of how we use our own product for sharing, to share with developers, developer applications, et cetera. Last one, and I'll stop, is how do you build the community and how do you support the community? And I think one of the interesting things that you can do when you have a very large developer community is you can really reach out to people and have situations and opportunities for developers to work with each other. And I think increasingly in an environment where things are happening very, very quickly, it's wrong to think that the communication should always be bidirectional. It's within the community.
So the way to make the social platform scale well and painlessly is to make the developer community social.
Right, exactly.
Got it. Because jumping at something, or
No, I probably have a controversial view, because I think we're looking at, we're not talking about the important, we're not talking about the important level of the platform. I think we're confusing two different things here, and I'll explain what I mean. Let's go back 16, 17 years. At the time, I was on a similar discussion about another platform. Lotus 123 had these macros. People had written these macros, and there was deep concern. Now, would Excel support those macros? Were you going to be locked in if you were a corporation and you had invested in all these application-level extensibility points? And we resolved it. Over time, that problem went away as there was compatibility. That wasn't the interesting debate 17 years ago. That wasn't the platform. That was the application extensibility portion of Lotus 123 or Excel. The platform that was emerging was Windows, and that was the interesting story. Today, whether Facebook's extensible, MySpace is extensible, those are platforms in of themselves. Open Social is a play to make those things more open and extensible. It's important, but it's not the big story. The big story is that all of us are building on top of a horizontal platform called the web. And how do we move that forward? When is presentation on the web going to get faster? When are we going to be able to write apps that take advantage of new capabilities of mobile devices, like the microphone, or the camera, or the accelerometer? How do we move the state of the art of the platform we all depend on forward? Of course, we all have extensibility points. That's interesting. But I think at Google, we're very interested in that lower level as well, the base platform that the entire industry is built on.
I think the problem with that much of a macro view is that if you take the micro view, you can get yourself 400,000 developers innovating at the lower level like crazy every single day. If you say, wait guys, you know, the accelerometer is going to have to come in. Let's get a standards committee going, and in 5 years' time, we'll have something.
And I think that's a problem. I think that's a real problem. That's the interesting challenge. I mean, you take something like location. On the iPhone, you can, as a developer, make an API call and find location. And you have seen an explosion of hundreds of applications on the iPhone that take advantage of that native capability. Should that be standardized? Should we bring that into web browsers? How do we make it so that all applications built on the web can take advantage of that kind of capability? I think there's a whole host of questions like that in moving the web forward that we need to be discussing. And it's certainly an area that at Google we're very, very focused on.
Well, just to hit on some of the client points we talked about earlier, I totally agree with you about how compelling things like location can be, and audio input with a microphone, super, super compelling things. But a lot of that's about the computing horsepower that you have right there on the client close to you. So the reason a lot of those become interesting is not that there's websites hosted in data centers. It's about using that local client computing horsepower and then blending it, backing it with web sharing and the interoperability and communication capabilities of the web. So it's really about both of them. It's not about either one.
So I think it's the guys with the established business model that basically mints money that want to talk about the really cool philosophical issues, and the guys trying to make a go at a startup, more or less, are really concerned with the low-level stuff.
It's an interesting philosophical debate. The question is, how do you have innovation? Do you have innovation by having experimentation in a variety of formats, or do you say, let's start with the standard setting? Again, I don't think there's a single right answer. I think there are lots of wrong answers. And the wrong answers are if you make everybody wait, or the wrong answers if you let everybody go pell-mell. Everybody wants to, it's actually a great philosophical point. There's no doubt that over time, these standards emerge. The question is, at what point do you begin the process of building those standards? I think our experience has been, that, with 120 million people and 450,000, developers, we can get started doing lots of stuff now. There's no question over time these things will converge and should converge. But it's not clear to me that you sort of say, okay, wait, everybody, let's get started doing the standards.
Amit, do you want to comment?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of us are in agreement on that. The whole thing is evolving, and for us, a lot of this even started in terms of Web 2.0 application development. A lot of this for us started before this concept of a formalized platform. And I won't bring up Slide again, but you guys know that almost better than anybody, and folks like YouTube and PhotoBucket. So when we originally opened up, it was part of our philosophy, our product philosophy early on of let people build very interesting experiences for our users, give them the tools, and see what happens, and let them define that experience. And we've just seen all of this evolve with our formalized platform, with our launch of data availability, and throughout all of that, the importance of communication with the developer community has become increasingly vital to our business and our product going forward. And the idea of just continuing to like Elliot said, also just provide new tools. And our tools that we focus on as well. I go back to this a lot, but it's not just product tools, but there's also tools to help people build their business model. And again, that's something that for us, we believe those two are tied hand in hand. They're inextricable in that you can't just build a great product if it doesn't have a business behind it. And I think in these economic times, everybody's realizing that more than ever. So, the tools that we're providing, things like, ad network, audience network integration, and, trying to enable people with new payment offerings, and the promotional tools through our self-serve program called MyAds are new innovations that we're looking to kind of, stimulate that ecosystem with.
Fantastic lead up to my next question. So you provide these tools, and I know so does Facebook, and Microsoft certainly long known for the public companies that emerge in the shadow of Windows, and Google certainly has a very powerful monetization platform. So you look around the landscape and say, the company over there, let's, whatever their name might be, is making a little too much money in our platform. In the past, Microsoft would be like, oh, that word processing guys with the Mormon persuasion, we got to do something about that. And 7 years later, they're finally dead. You can launch stuff tomorrow morning that kills them a little strong, but maybe competes with them, maybe just reduces their ability to monetize a little. You don't want to, you don't have to, but it's a temptation, and it's a temptation where the gun is on the table and it's loaded and you can just point and shoot. So it's a philosophical debate you have to have with yourself, and it's a tough one because in these economic times, you got shareholders, public shareholders, God forbid, that tell you, increase your earnings or we're going to dump your shares. So how do you define the policy, even in your own head or in your own sort of executive committee's heads? What does it mean to carve out the space for developers, or do you not? Or how do you decide when to compete and when not to compete?
For us, I think like practically speaking, those so far, most of the applications that have seen success have been complementary rather than competitive, even if they're in the same vertical or the same channels that we're building products.
But are they competing for the same dollars?
I mean, it depends. I think that if you look at it as though there's a limited pie, then sure. But I think the way that we look at it is that there is a lot of innovation and growth that's still left in social media and on social platforms. And so by inviting them in and by giving them giving developers that environment, it's just going to increase the size of the pie. It's not a zero-sum game. And I think as we look at it, it's if somebody builds a competitive app that's competitive with, say, like our photos product or our mail product, we welcome that. We want to see that because it's going to provide a better experience for our users, in the environment or in a way that MySpace is providing the context for, or providing the underlying layer, and that keeps us relevant. It keeps our users engaged with the core product, the core social network that we've built. And so I think that's the way we look at it. And if we were to take a different stance in that we're going to shut people down, or we're going to build directly competitive products and suppress other developers, in the long run, that's not going to be in our interest, because you're going to lose the trust of the developer community. And it goes back to the issues we were talking about earlier with communications and making sure that your interests are aligned. And so, you have to look at it from a long-term strategic perspective, and sure, we could, maybe make some short-term sacrifice and make that play, but, I think we're looking at this for long-term value, and that's not the right move.
So would it be okay, Vic, if I built the best search engine on Android?
The simple answer is yes. I'll give you two other comments here. I mean, if you want a recipe for disaster, take no competitors plus complete control of a platform equals a complete disappearing of all innovation.
Absolutely.
You end up with the person who controls the platform. You end up with innovation that happens every 5 years, if you can call that innovation.
I think he's calling you out.
Yeah, I think it is.
Remember, I spent 15 years at a place where I thought we provided a lot of leadership, platform leadership. Microsoft did a lot of amazingly great things. I think we live in a different era. I don't think when it comes to the platform, even Google can say, we carve this section out. It's the open web. That's why Google takes things like Android, Chrome, Open Social. Not only do we make it open source on the internet, we renounce our IP so that people can take things like Open Social and innovate without even talking to us. Because we don't control the platform. And it's magical when the platform belongs not to Google, but to all of us. And it's not just, rhetoric. This is something we believe in and act on.
Oh, come on, David. Come
Yeah,
on.
I was just about to go there. I mean, that's great that you're so enthusiastic about openness. I mean, it really is. And the open web certainly has been terrific. And yet, as you pointed out earlier, there's many different layers of platform and many different ways in which to be open. So, if you really want to be open, where's the open search and ads platform built on top of that?
Well, like I said, there's an open internet. That doesn't mean that the entire world will go completely free. I think one of the magical things about the open internet is that it has places for people to build businesses. And we're not saying we're going to open source every single thing in the world. We're talking about the internet platform. And I think the internet platform, you have to be very clear and say, this is something that benefits all of us, and it should be open.
Renounce the PageRank patent.
Yeah, well.
Certainly agree on the open internet platform. It's inspired amazing innovation.
I think the big story, is really over the last 10 years. When we look back, we'll say it was Windows versus the web, and the web has won.
That's pretty strong. All right, we have 32 seconds according to the clock, so we're going to miss a bunch of.
But the
really
battle will
important-
continue backstage.
The battle will continue
Screen.
backstage, you'll see. But I have a blitz round for our wonderful contestants. One question per person. Amit, 3 types of applications you have not seen on your platform but would love to, or one for that matter.
So I think that we want to see more applications that provide long-term value. We've seen a lot of focus on people just trying to drive a lot of immediate adoption and short-term traffic. So we're starting to see more and more of that. Guys like Zynga are building virtual worlds on top of their gaming network. So things along those lines are interesting. We'd love to see mobile extensions through a data availability platform. And I'd like to see more use of kind of internal applications that are more user-facing as opposed to like right now you see a lot of things that are just for the expressive side of the profile, but we have a user homepage that's also modular that we can start to see people build applications directly for the user.
Got it.
Do I get to answer that one?
Nope.
Oh,
You
okay.
can answer. I'd love to hear your answer, incidentally. Actually, you answered because I think it's very interesting.
Well, I think, again, we just announced on Monday an interesting collaboration with Salesforce. I'd love to see some enterprise applications. I think the concept of sharing isn't something that's only, a social graph. Maybe there should be an enterprise graph or a commercial graph that we can, that really gets leveraged. So I'd love to see enterprise apps. I'd love to see health. I think, there's information about health, and that would be incredibly valuable where communities of interest around particular, whether it's around particular medical conditions or for families that are dealing with them. I think there are real opportunities there and really exciting things. Mark always talks about religious applications. Okay.
Maybe I'll get religion.
Yeah.
David, so this is actually good lead up. So those that have a social graph claim power and intelligence and all sorts of great things about it. Those that do not claim email-driven social graph. We have an address book, and that's almost as good, or maybe it's even better. So is that really better, or?
Well, the social graph is a super relevant part of a platform. One thing that we've done with Microsoft is we've made ours open. So there's the Contacts API where the nearly 500 million users of Windows Live who've established a social graph, both email and Messenger, we've opened that up such that applications can take advantage of it for file distribution and other mechanisms.
Are the links in the graph, so to say, or the edges, to use a technical term, are they weighted equally to the kind of social graph that Facebook has built?
Well, certainly a transacted social relationship has an advantage in that both people have agreed to it. There's a connection there as opposed to just me dropping my somebody's email address in my contacts list. Now, they're both relevant. The Contacts API that we have allows both the Messenger contacts, which are transacted relationships, as well as the unidirectional email style relationships.
Vic, you talked open. So how about acquiring some of the best platform application makers? Is that a good idea, or that actually just rides all sorts of lack of confidence into the book?
It's a great economic environment to go look for good things to purchase.
That's an excellent answer. Last but not least, Elliot, social ad networks. Is it a cross-platform goodness that suddenly you have 1 trillion people you can literally access, or is it basically just cannon fodder for the ever-declining CPM warfare?
Yeah, so I think it's probably both, depending upon how it works out. It's a really good question, and part of the evolution of where the market is we're going to have to figure it out. We're doing some stuff, other people are as well, but we can talk about that on the same panel next year.
All right. Well, we're officially some minutes out of time, so I would like you to join me in thanking the panelists. I think this was pretty fun.